Hello and welcome. In this video, I am going to be talking about luxury in Hong Kong. I'm Anesu Sagonda and I produce educational luxury content for anyone after the finer things, whether you're new to money and wanting to learn how to navigate the terrain, or you're young and starting out in life and wanting to reap the benefits of buying better quality from the get-go, or you're into luxury but you want to focus more on high quality under the radar brands, then my content is geared towards you. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Singapore and Hong Kong. It was a trip that was part business, part pleasure. From a business point of view, one of the things I wanted to achieve was to see what luxury looks like in those two markets. Singapore and Hong Kong are some of my core markets. I have some of my biggest viewers in those markets. I can't choose who views my content. That's down to the magical YouTube algorithm. But what I can choose is how I respond to my viewers, creating content that I think is of value, content that's focused. I know my key audience, what luxury looks like in their home market, what do they have, what don't they have, what does it look like, what are the brands and so forth. And I thought seeing those two markets that are fairly sizable markets for my channel would be advantageous to both myself and also to my viewers. And one thing that I always do when I travel is I never overly organize a trip. I mean, I know the basics, where I'm staying, what I'm going to do and eat and so forth. But what I like to do is to have the bare bones and then just let things unfold, enjoy the country, experience things, learn things on the ground. But what I do is I will always compare a country to South Africa before I go. And I think, is it on par? Is it a little ahead? Is it a little behind? What are Hong Kong and Singapore? And I actually thought Hong Kong would be maybe on par, just a little ahead of South Africa, if at all just a smidge. And I thought Singapore, we know, is a fairly developed country. They've transcended from developing to developed. So they're ahead of South Africa. But when I was on the ground, I was absolutely blown. Firstly, with Hong Kong, when it came to the luxury, on my way from the airport to the hotel, there was a big sign saying premier destination for art and luxury. And I thought, oh my gosh, isn't that a little arrogant to say? But by the second day, I was thinking, oh my gosh, when it comes to aspirational brands, I mean, Hong Kong, you can't do any better than Hong Kong. If I was somebody who was really into aspirational brands and I wanted to shop somewhere where I had an abundance of options, I can't recommend Hong Kong highly enough. And then when I looked at Singapore, the level of development, the efficiency, the order, the cleanliness, the safety is just next level. It's exemplary. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I've read books, articles talking about LKY and moving Singapore from developing to a developed economy. And I mean, you have to give credit where credit is due. And both countries, I was absolutely blown by them. I was also incredibly mindful of the fact that the Chinese are the largest luxury consumers in the world at the moment. Hong Kong has a special administrative arrangement. It's a region of China. I refer to it as China. It's Chinese. And Singapore's largest population is Chinese people. And so you have a lot of Chinese moving between Hong Kong and China, and also moving to Singapore, traveling to Singapore. But more so, you have the shopping in Hong Kong. You have a lot of movement between China and Hong Kong because you have the common language, the culture, the food, for example. That is a huge driver of traffic from China into Hong Kong. And I remember talking to a few people and they mentioned we're getting a lot of Chinese coming into Hong Kong, and then brands talk about harmonization and also just having the stock, because you have consumers who are ready, who are hungry, who want the brands. And because China is a new market, it's relatively young, it's newer to money. What I did find, and I would expect, this wasn't something that I thought, oh, this is bizarre. It's the aspirational brands that are incredibly important. Typically, when people start their luxury journeys, it's the aspirational brands they typically go for. So the big luxury groups, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, Kering, Richemont, for example, what you will find is their respective portfolio of different brands, they will typically have standalone stores in Singapore and in Hong Kong, as opposed to a concession or a small store. What really stood out was the big stores, a lot of space and a lot of product in the store, because they have the consumers who have the money, who have the appetite, who want to buy the products. What I distinctly did notice is that, of course, they didn't have as many of the high quality under the radar, the brands I talk about, what is now referred to as quiet luxury. But that will come with time as the market matures, as consumer tastes become more discerning over time, as they learn. The internet is opening up the world to everyone for the taking. So the only difference, when I looked at myself, my primary residence is in the United Kingdom, and I've always thought, we are one of the hubs when it comes to fashion, it comes to finance, we have it all going on here, people come to us. The only real difference is we have a much wider variety of brands. We have the aspirational as well as high quality under the radar, but the world has opened up. A lot of the brands that are here, they ship globally, but it's just letting people know about what else is out there. And that's the only thing I felt was really lacking when it came to luxury. I mean, the good and the great is there from the aspirational, but more of the quiet luxury, the obvious ones were there. Loro Piano, Brunello Cucinelli, slightly lower price point, Max Mara, Max & Co, for example. But the niche brands that I like, that I'm focused on, that don't have hype, don't have a lot of those. And speaking to a couple of people, they were like, yes, there is the market for those sort of brands, high quality under the radar. And people who are after that typically will travel, they will look online, they know what's out there and they order. But I kept thinking, how do I reach more of my high quality under the radar consumers? But this video is not for people who are based in Singapore or in Hong Kong, for example. Hong Kong is my focus in this video because you teach me a lot more than I could ever talk to you about. This video is more just going through my observations when it comes to luxury within Hong Kong. Hong Kong is made up of a number of islands. Hong Kong Island is where I was based in central Hong Kong, in a hotel that was located in the IFC Mall. IFC Mall, incredibly tall building with financial institutions in the bulk of the building, and then the basement is the mall. And next to IFC Mall is the Landmark Mall, literally 3 minutes between them. And then the third mall, Pacific Place, is also located on Hong Kong Island. But I spent very little time in there because I thought there was a lot of overlap between Pacific Place and IFC Mall. And I prefer to spend a little more time looking at tailoring, which I will talk about in a bit. Hong Kong Island is where I'm told the wealthiest people in Hong Kong typically reside. As you make your way back and up the island, it becomes incredibly mountainous. I would highly recommend venturing up to the top of the island to the peak. There's a tram called the Peak Tram, which I recommend taking. If you can sit backwards, you get the most spectacular, breathtaking views of Hong Kong as you make your way up to the peak. Nestled within the mountains as you make your way up to the peak are residential properties, fairly big, expensive properties. And then right at the top, there's an observatory and you get panoramic views of Hong Kong. And you also have a couple of fairly informal malls with convenience, fast food, a couple of activity centers for children. It's more of a tourist destination with the observatory, which I highly recommend purely for the views. And then you can make your way down. So there's the IFC Mall, the Landmark Mall, and the Pacific Place, all 3 located on Hong Kong Island. And when I compared Pacific Place and IFC Mall, there was just a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap when it comes to the brands in both of the malls. Both of them have a lot of the hugely aspirational brands owned by the big luxury groups. And as I mentioned earlier, fairly big stores with a lot of product in them. And I like the fact that it's standalone stores as opposed to little concessions. So you get a good feel for the brands and their product. I also managed to see Kilang, a Japanese jeweler for the first time that's owned by Kering. We also had stores from the other luxury groups. Think of Spanish group Puig, I remember seeing L'Artisan Parfumer, Byredo store in both. And then a smaller Chinese group for Sun that owns Lanvin and Wolford and St. John. They have Lanvin and Wolford in FC and just Wolford in Pacific Place. But with both malls, a lot of crossover, also mid-tier brands. Think of the average mid-lux brands, Sandro, Madge, Bash, for example. Also stumbled upon that was just unique to IFC, Acne, Paul Smith. I remember seeing Hobbs, Etro, a brand I talk about, Furla, a quiet luxury brand. Valextra had a fairly sizable store within the IFC mall. They also had Agnes B, they had Dax, and I really liked the Dax store because Dax is a fantastic clothing brand with a royal warrant that literally disappeared off the high street in the United Kingdom, and saw them in Hong Kong for the first time in many years. Also saw Mikimoto in IFC, whereas Pacific Place they have Tasaki, which is focused more towards contemporary pearl designs. Mikimoto is more classic. And then Pacific Place, a number of brands that were just unique to them. I remember seeing Marimekko, Isabel Marant, Bali, for example. There were quite a few brands, but depending on your taste and what you're after, I would recommend, if you're someone like myself who doesn't have a lot of time, head towards IFC Mall, because you have 3-minute walk away, the Landmark. So you have 2 malls in one, essentially. Unless you have a brand you specifically would like that's only located at Pacific Place, I would recommend IFC and Landmark first and foremost. And there's just a fairly long walkway that links the Landmark and IFC. Go one way, it leads to the ferry, another way, the MRT, and then the end of the walkway, you have the Ding Dings, for example. What you have in both Pacific Place and also IFC is Lane Crawford. It's a top-end Hong Kong luxury department store, and I really liked Lane Crawford because it brought in a totally different range of brands. I like the fact that they had incredibly niche Western fashion brands I had never heard of. They also had a good number of Asian brands from Taiwan, from Japan, South Korea, for example. They also had a small selection of Moreau bags, but they still had Moreau bags. And they also had BONASTRE bags. BONASTRE is a brand I've recently started talking about. And what I really liked about BONASTRE in Lane Crawford was they had a couple of bags. They didn't have a lot, a couple. And one of them was a big khaki travel bag. I don't know what it is about me and travel bags. I really like khaki travel bags, khaki totes. Joseph Duclos have a beautiful lecture tote in khaki, and they had the same big travel bag in khaki, absolutely beautifully made. Also in Lane Crawford, I remember seeing a big wall. I didn't take a picture of this, but a big wall, a big cabinet rather, with special edition Birkins and Kellys that were brand new, and they were sold as good as new. And essentially they bought them from Hermes and they were selling them secondhand, but they had never been used, and they were literally triple the price, but some really interesting designs. So that's Lane Crawford. In the Landmark, I noticed something really interesting. Because I was based in the IFC mall, whenever I went to meetings or I was looking at brands, I typically end up going into the IFC mall or Landmark. And I remember a couple of times over lunch, people watching whilst eating my dim sum, and I couldn't help but notice a large number of professional women. For every 10 women I saw, I kid you not, at least 3, possibly 4 were wearing Roger Vivier shoes, whether it's pumps or the ballerinas. Incredibly popular in Hong Kong. What is it about Roger Vivier in Hong Kong? To my viewers, please tell me why this brand is so popular in Hong Kong, to the point where in the Landmark, they have a massive boutique, a size of boutique I've never seen, especially when it comes to Roger Vivier. And I think of London, for example, both boutiques are incredibly small. Hong Kong double the size, of course, because they have the consumers who like the product, but they had pretty much everything from the pumps to the ballerinas. They had a fairly big bridal selection, the more casual shoes, the trainers with the big buckles, for example. They had absolutely everything. And I noticed whilst in Roger Vivier, brands talk a lot about price harmonization, but I did notice, and especially when I looked at the trumpet ballerinas, they were at least £100 more expensive than, for example, in Europe or in the United Kingdom, for example. But beautiful store nonetheless, in terms of just getting a good first-hand understanding of just the width and the breadth of what Roger Vivier produced. Next to Roger Vivier, Kwanpen. I'd been asked to take a look at Kwanpen. Had a good look at Kwanpen in Hong Kong and also in Singapore. It's a Singapore brand. And I will talk about Kwanpen together with Pour Le Page. I've been asked to give my thoughts on their exotic bags. And then also within the landmark, there's Delvaux concession, which they don't have in the IFC or in Pacific Place, also Moynat. And I noticed Moynat on my way to the Armoury. The Armoury, because I've seen the Armoury in New York. I wanted to see the Armoury in Hong Kong. If you'd like to order anything from Otis and you're a Japanese speaker, then the Armoury store is the right store for you. And I also wanted to take a look in the Armoury at Frank Clegg, an American brand. I wanted to look at their totes. And I also wanted to talk to them about tailoring, because they host a number of tailors, but international tailors, not just tailors from Hong Kong. And I wanted to explore tailoring, but specifically for women. And then on my way to the Armoury, I stumbled upon Moynat. I wasn't intending to go in, and I noticed there were two boutiques, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I was looking through the window at their bags, and the assistant insisted on me coming in. And she very quickly proceeded to tell me that they had all the Rejans on sale, with the exception of the black and the brown Rejan. And I looked at what they had on offer and the color I chose. I was inspecting the bag, and I noticed a very subtle tear to the leather. And I asked the lady, oh, what is this? And acted as if I didn't know what was happening. And she said, oh, you have to be careful. The leather's delicate, you know, with wear and tear, it can tear. And I thought, that's not what I want to hear when it comes to Moynat. Had a good look around at the bags. Also had a look in Singapore. And in Singapore, the young man was incredibly gracious and generous with the information, and mentioned the brand is expanding. They're now producing a lot of their bags outside France, in Italy. Small leather goods are being produced in Spain, for example. So that to me confirmed change in craft. The hardware in the leathers, for example, I looked at two bags, same style but different leathers, and I'll talk about that in a later video where I talk about the differences between the Ramesh bags and what they are producing now, just to confirm to my viewers that there is a difference between what consumers are now getting. And then from Moynat, I backtracked and had a look at Sulwashoo. It's an incredibly popular premium K-beauty brand, and I have been investigating K-beauty because I'm trying to figure out just how effective it is on black skin. It's for Asian skin typically. They have a certain level of melanin, so I'm not sure if it's going to be as efficient, as effective on black skin. And I went into the boutique purely to learn about the brand. And the young lady proceeded to totally bulldoze my questions, and she asked, is it for you? And I said, yes. I mentioned their hugely popular serum. And she said, oh, no, this is not for you. And she proceeded to recommend the most expensive range, their top end range. And she very quickly told me, without missing a breath, that I had really bad wrinkles. My forehead, around my mouth, incredibly bad. And as somebody who thought they didn't have wrinkles, I was absolutely floored. And I just remember for a second thinking, do I laugh or do I cry? Or do I call my mother and tell her what's just happened? And because of the time difference, it was 6 a.m. in the United Kingdom. So I wasn't able to call my mom, but I was just a bit stunned. And the lady didn't listen at all. So it was a missed opportunity because I purely wanted to learn about the brand. I'd been wanting to learn for quite a while. I've been following them on social media, but she literally bulldozed my questions and told me what she felt I had to listen to. But I managed to catch up with the brand in Singapore. And finally, I explored tailoring. When it comes specifically to men and women's clothing and shoes, men's clothing and their shoes are worlds apart. What you will find is there are brands focused on producing the very best when it comes to using the highest quality materials, and the craftsmanship absolutely impeccable that goes into producing the products. But you don't typically get that when it comes to women's clothes. One of the main reasons is women have fairly high turnover of clothes. Women buy a lot of clothes for different occasions, different reasons, different seasons, for example. And so clothes are not as well made. But I thought to myself, I'm somebody who grew up having clothes made when I was young, and I appreciated firsthand the merits of clothes that are made from very good quality materials. The cut is unique to you. The clothes fit like a glove, and they're finished very well. And that's something that I think is really important. You have the trade-off of getting clothes that are very well made, tailored, versus buying clothes from the aspirational brands. They're 3, 4, 5 times the price of tailored clothes, but tailored clothes are better when you compare the materials and also the cut and the craft that's gone into the clothes. And I know Hong Kong is very well known for men's tailoring, and I just wanted to see how advanced, how developed is women's tailoring. I was fairly disappointed, and I thought, let me explore mid-tier brands and let me explore top-end brands. Mid-tier, I've ventured out to Kowloon, to a place called Tsim Sha Tsui. I know I'm not pronouncing it correctly. And there were 2 tailors that I'd been told about that were fairly popular. The first, Sam's Tailor, and I walked into the tailor, the shop itself, and didn't realize, it was only when I left that Sam is the one who actually met me. And he was on the phone when I walked in. He was sitting in a chair opposite the front door, and he didn't even look at me. He literally carried on, saw me, I guess my shadow from his phone, and he just motioned to someone. Didn't even look at me, didn't acknowledge me. And a lovely lady came over and explained that they are largely focused on replicating designer brand outfits. If you find something you like from one of the brands, they will replicate that for you in a few days' time. That is pretty much their template, their business model. And you're going to pay anything from $250 to $350, $400, depending on how, I guess, they've gauged you. They look at you and think, how much are you worth? The second place I went to was a place called Raja Tailor. And it was the first time in my entire life I felt so stressed. I walked in and I made it very clear that I'm exploring the whole tailoring concept. I'd like a blazer, and if it's possible, I wouldn't mind getting one made before I went back to the United Kingdom. But I wasn't in a rush. I wanted to understand the brands first. And I was served by Mr. Raja himself. He was incredibly aggressive, and his aggression was just so overwhelming. I felt ill, and I would never wish that on anyone. And what I learned talking to people after that experience was that Kowloon, and in particular Tsim Sha Tsui, is not typically the place you go for the tailors. That is literally cowboy territory. The 2 that I did see, I wouldn't recommend at all. It's going to be very quick. Possibly the clothes are going to be decently made. I wouldn't say they're made to a very high standard. They'd be made well enough for you to wear a number of times for you to get your wear and tear, but you will notice the finish, the materials, the details will be different to a brand, a slightly more high-end brand, typically based in central Hong Kong, that would produce a much better product. But what I discovered, went to see some of the top-end tailors geared towards men, just to get an idea if they do anything for women. I went to see Ascot Chang. They're focused a lot more on shirts, but they also produce clothes. Went to look at WW Chan, also had a look at the Armoury, and I went there to look at the American brand, as I mentioned, but also to find out about the other tailors that they work with under the umbrella. And the tailors they work with produce very limited items for women. One of them produces a jacket and the other a couple of polo shirts. And I was incredibly disappointed, because I think it's unfortunate tailors haven't really tapped into the female market, because there are women like myself, for example. I would rather buy a blazer that I wear for many years, but it's incredibly well made. The cut, the fabric, the fit is absolutely superb. And to me, that's where the magic is. And I'd rather spend the money I would spend on an aspirational brand on something that is not branded, but it's incredibly well made, and in most cases much better made than the aspirational brand. So that's an opportunity, I think a missed opportunity in Hong Kong, and it would be great to hear from my viewers in Hong Kong if there are any established female tailors out there. Would they recommend? What are they producing, and so forth? Because To me, when it comes to clothes, the magic is in being able to choose high quality fabrics and then getting superior cuts when it comes to how clothes are made and how they fit and how they wear and how they last, for example. So that's Hong Kong in a nutshell. The luxury that I experienced, that I saw, what I observed of the Hong Kong market. Let me know your thoughts. Anybody on their way to Hong Kong, anybody who's been, did you see the same? Let me know as always in the comments down below.